Imagine a young boy walking for days along a lonely road. He carries no bag, no food, and has no safe place to sleep at night. The wind is sharp, the nights are freezing, and his empty stomach cries with hunger. Still, step after step, he keeps moving forward without stopping. For 2 long years, this child walked through storms, through pain, and through exhaustion. He had nothing to protect him, no one to support him, and no money to buy even a piece of bread. Most children in his place would give up, but he refused to surrender. That boy's name was Louis Vuitton. Yes, the same Louis Vuitton whose name today shines on the most powerful luxury brand in the world. But long before the fashion houses and the fame, he was only a poor, hungry child. He had no future, no comfort, and no home to call his own. And yet, against all odds, he turned struggle into success and suffering into strength. How did he do it? How did a boy with nothing build a billion-dollar empire? How could he transform pain into power and create beauty out of misery? Every moment you will hear in this story is real. Each detail of his journey, from poverty to greatness, is true. Stay with this story until the end, and you will see how a boy who started with nothing reached the highest level of luxury. This is not only an inspiring tale, but also your chance to learn English naturally. With real events, rich vocabulary, and emotional storytelling, you will improve while enjoying a powerful life journey. Let us go back to the beginning. The year was 1821 in a small French village called Antwi. A baby boy was born in a family that struggled with poverty. His name was Louis Vuitton. Life did not welcome him with comfort. From the very first day, hardships surrounded him. His father, Xavier Vuitton, was a carpenter who spent long hours building furniture and wooden pieces. His mother, Caron Gallard, worked as a hat maker, sewing hats for local women. Both parents worked day and night, but their income was never enough. The family lived in a tiny wooden house, with a leaking roof and cold, wet floors. During winter, the snow covered Antwi for months, and icy winds made survival almost impossible. There was no heating, no warm blankets, and no comfortable bed. From an early age, Louis learned that life was unfair. He did not have toys like rich children, nor could he go to school. Instead, he spent his childhood helping his father in carpentry. He carried heavy wooden planks, hammered nails, and cleaned sawdust from the floor. His hands became rough, his clothes often torn, and his stomach stayed empty many nights. But Louis was not like the other children in his village. Though he was poor and had nothing, he carried something rare, a dream. Every day, he watched travelers passing through Antwi. These people wore fine clothes and carried beautiful wooden trunks. Louis looked at them with deep curiosity. Where were they going? Who made those wonderful trunks they carried? He had never seen the world beyond his small village. But his heart was burning with questions, with hunger for knowledge, and with a desperate wish for a better life. Sadly, fate was cruel to him. At only 10 years old, he faced his first great tragedy. His mother fell ill, and there were no doctors in the village to help her. Day after day, her condition worsened until one morning, as the sun rose, she took her final breath. Louis stood at her grave in silence, unable to cry. His world had fallen apart. His father, crushed by grief, grew cold and distant. He no longer had the strength to care for his son. For the first time, Louis felt truly alone in the world. But even in that sadness, he made a decision. He promised himself that he would not stay in the village forever. He would not accept a life of poverty and hopelessness. He would leave, and he would follow his dream. But the question was, how? At the age of 13, Louis had no money, no food, and no horse to carry him. The great city of Paris, full of dreams and opportunities, was 470 kilometers away. For a boy with nothing, the journey seemed impossible. And yet, his story had only just begun. One silent evening, while the village was falling asleep, Louis made his choice. He packed a small bag, though it carried almost nothing inside. No map, no guide, no money, only a dream to follow. He told no one, not even his father. Before dawn arrived, before anyone could notice, Louis slipped away. With his first step, the long road to Paris began. He did not know how he would survive or what dangers he would meet along the way. But one thing was certain, he could not turn back. He walked for hours that became days, and days that turned into weeks. His feet ached, his body felt weak, but he kept moving. Sometimes a kind villager gave him bread. Other nights, he slept under trees, with his bag as his only pillow. He crossed thick forests, icy rivers, and tall mountains. In small villages, he worked for farmers, receiving food in exchange for labor. Rain soaked his clothes, winter winds cut into his skin, and hunger followed him. Still, he never gave up. For 2 years, Louis walked with nothing but his determination to guide him. Finally, he reached Paris. But the city was not the dream he had imagined in his heart. It was huge, crowded, and overwhelming. Carriages rushed past. Markets were filled with food and perfumes, and fresh bread scented the air. These were luxuries Louis had never known. But behind the beauty was another Paris. Dirty streets, beggars, thieves, and poor workers struggling to survive. The truth was harsh. Paris was not kind to the poor. Louis had no family, no home, and no money. He stood at the edge of the city, exhausted, with torn clothes and bleeding feet. His stomach growled with hunger, but he had nothing to eat. For the first time, fear touched his heart. Where would he sleep? How would he go on? That night, he crawled into an abandoned wooden cart near a bakery. Holding his small bag to his chest, he tried to rest as the streets filled with noise. Horses clattered, people shouted, and rats searched for food, but Louis was too tired to care. At sunrise, hunger forced him to wake. He watched as rich men and women entered bakeries, buying golden bread and soft croissants. The smell was painful, but he had no choice. He needed work. He walked from shop to shop, begging for a job. Everywhere, the answer was the same. No skills, no work. No connections, no chance. No money, no food. Paris was cruel to those who had nothing. Days passed, and Louis grew weaker. He searched markets for scraps, picking bread from the ground when no one was looking. His clothes were dirty, his body was aching, and he had never felt so alone. But still, he refused to give up. One evening, he noticed a man struggling with a heavy trunk outside a shop. Without thinking, Louis ran to help, lifting the other side. Together, they carried it inside. The shop amazed him. Trunks of all shapes and sizes lined the walls. Some were covered with leather, others locked with brass and decorated with golden letters. Louis had never seen such beauty before. The owner, Monsieur Marichal, watched him closely. "You are strong for your age," the man said. "What is your name?" "Louis Vuitton, sir." "And what do you want?" Louis took a deep breath. "I want to work." Marichal raised an eyebrow. "Can you make trunks?" Louis hesitated, then whispered, "No, sir, but I can learn." The old man laughed. "Everyone says that. Few are willing to do the hard work." Louis felt his stomach twist. He could not fail again. "Give me a chance," he begged. "I will work harder than anyone else." Silence filled the room. Finally, Marichal nodded. "You start tomorrow. No money yet. You work, you learn. If you're good, then we will talk." Louis bowed in gratitude. He had done it. He found a place to stay and learn. The next morning, he arrived before sunrise. The workshop smelled of fresh wood and strong glue. Tools, hammers, saws, chisels, needles covered the tables. Louis was given simple tasks: sweeping the floor, bringing tools, cleaning after the craftsman. At first, he was happy. At least he was warm and safe. But weeks passed, and he was still only doing small chores. Deep inside, he longed to build. One night, after everyone had left, he stayed behind. He picked up a small wooden panel and tried to copy what he had seen during the day. He hammered, carved, and stitched, teaching himself with every move. The next morning, Marichal noticed. He lifted the piece, checking the smooth edges and neat stitches. "Did you make this?" he asked. Louis nodded nervously. The old man's eyes softened. "From now on, stay after work. I'll teach you." From that day forward, Louis worked harder than ever. He learned how to shape wood, choose the best leather, and stitch with care. He studied every movement of the master craftsmen until their skills became his own. Days turned into years, and he was no longer a simple helper. By the age of 20, Louis was a true artisan. His hands were no longer those of a poor village boy. They were the hands of a master craftsman. Customers began asking for him by name. "I want my trunk made by Vuitton." "Who crafted this trunk?" Whispers began to spread across Paris. "The young man named Vuitton. His trunks are the finest in the city." Step by step, his reputation grew like a fire carried by the wind. He was no longer viewed as just another poor worker. Louis was becoming someone people sought out, someone who carried promise in his very name. And then, one afternoon, the moment arrived that would forever change his destiny. The bell above the workshop door rang softly, and in stepped a woman whose very presence silenced the room. She moved with an elegance that spoke of power, her silk gown gliding across the floor like water, a pearl necklace gleaming against her skin. But it was not her jewelry that made the workers stare in awe. It was her name. She was Empress Eugenie, the wife of Napoleon III, ruler of France. This was not simply another wealthy client. This was royalty itself, standing in the dusty workshop among trunks and tools. Golden chandeliers illuminated her diamonds, which sparkled with every tilt of her head, as her sharp eyes inspected the room with an expression of quiet disapproval. The trunks along the walls seemed suddenly dull, ordinary, beneath her. But then her gaze stopped. She had noticed Louis. Her piercing look lingered on the young craftsman, and in a commanding yet calm voice, she asked, Are you the one they call Vuitton?" Louis felt his heart hammer in his chest. Years of practice, endless nights of silent work, yet nothing had prepared him for this encounter. He bowed respectfully, forcing strength into his trembling voice. "Yes, Your Majesty." The Empress studied him for a moment longer before turning to Monsieur Marichal, the shop's owner. "I need a trunk," she declared, "but not like the ones I already have. They are too heavy, too old-fashioned, too inconvenient. I desire something new, something practical yet elegant, a trunk unlike any other." Louis's breath caught. This was it, his chance to step into history. He knew the flaws of traditional trunks: rounded tops that wasted space, thick leather that made them unbearably heavy, designs stuck in the past. And for years, in the back of his mind, he had imagined something different, something better. Gathering his courage, he stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, voice steady though his hands trembled. "What if I create a trunk that is light, modern, and easy to stack? A flat-top trunk built not of heavy leather, but of strong, waterproof canvas, durable enough for long journeys, yet refined enough for royalty. A hush fell over the room. Marichel's eyes widened in disbelief, as if Louis had spoken madness. No one had ever dared challenge centuries of tradition. But the Empress tilted her head, intrigued. "A flat-top trunk," she repeated softly. "Canvas instead of leather? That is unusual. Bold." Then her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Can you truly make such a thing, Vuitton?" Louis's heart thundered, but his answer was firm. "Yes, Your Majesty. I will not only make it, I will perfect it." Her smile deepened. "Then do it. Impress me." And so began weeks of sleepless nights. Louis poured his very soul into this creation, working long after the candles had burned low. He experimented with lighter woods, choosing poplar for its strength without weight. He flattened the top, designing trunks that could be neatly stacked for the first time in history. But his boldest move was to cover the trunk in pale gray waterproof canvas, a material elegant, durable, and utterly new. His hands became raw with cuts, glue hardened on his skin, his clothes turned ragged from labor. Often, he forgot to eat, too consumed by his vision. At last, after endless days and nights, the trunk stood finished. It gleamed softly under the light, graceful, modern, revolutionary. Not just a trunk, but a masterpiece. The day of the presentation came. Inside the palace, nobles and officials whispered scornfully as Louis stood alone, dressed in his simple work clothes, clutching his creation. What chance did this poor craftsman have before the most powerful woman in France? Then, the hall doors opened, and Empress Eugenie entered, her gown trailing like a river of silk. Her eyes fell on the trunk. She approached slowly, the room holding its breath. For a long, tense moment, she said nothing. She touched the smooth canvas, tested the golden locks, examined every stitch. Her silence was unbearable. Then, at last, she turned to Louis. "Vuitton," she said firmly, "this is extraordinary." Gasps echoed across the hall. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Even Marichal, who once doubted him, stared in stunned disbelief. The Empress smiled slightly. "From today, you shall be my personal trunk maker." In that instant, Louis's life transformed. The Empress's endorsement was more than approval. It was a crown of legitimacy. Suddenly, every aristocrat, politician, and wealthy traveler in Paris demanded a trunk made by Vuitton. His name became a symbol of elegance, of innovation, of excellence. But even as success bloomed, a shadow remained. Louis was still bound to Marichel's workshop. No matter how much fame he brought, he would always remain under another man's roof. That thought gnawed at him. He realized he needed freedom, his own name above his own door. And so, with trembling resolve, he took the boldest step of his life. He left the workshop, carrying nothing but his dream and the small savings he had managed to keep, no more than $1,000 in today's value. With it, he rented a modest space in Paris. The room was bare, the tools were few, but above the door hung a sign, Louis Vuitton, Maladier. For the first time, Louis was master of his own destiny. But destiny rarely comes without trials. The first months were brutal. He worked alone from sunrise until midnight, every trunk crafted entirely by his own weary hands. And just as his little shop began to grow, fate struck again. The Franco-Prussian War erupted, turning Paris into a city of chaos. Streets that once rang with carriages now echoed with gunfire. Wealthy clients fled, factories shut their doors, and luxury goods became worthless in a world of hunger and fear. Orders stopped. Money vanished. Louis's shop, once full of promise, now stood silent and empty. The boy who had walked 470 kilometers to Paris now stood at the edge of bankruptcy. But Louis Vuitton had survived storms, hunger, and endless struggle before. And deep within him, one truth remained unshakable. He would never give up. Louis sold some of his tools, cutting down on materials wherever he could, and worked longer hours than ever before. Each day was a battle against time, exhaustion, and dwindling savings. If things didn't change soon, everything he had built from scratch could vanish forever. Then, just when it seemed that hope had abandoned him, the war finally ended. Peace returned to France, and with it, a new era of opportunity. People were eager to travel again, hungry for elegance, style, and innovation. And they wanted one thing above all: Louis Vuitton trunks. Orders poured in like a tidal wave, filling his little shop with activity and excitement. The small, quiet workshop that had almost been deserted became the center of Parisian attention overnight. Louis didn't just rebuild his business, he expanded it, dreaming bigger than ever. In 1871, he opened a brand new workshop in Angers, just outside the bustling streets of Paris. The new space was 4 times the size of his original shop. He hired skilled workers, trained eager apprentices, and began designing entirely new collections. His dream had grown bigger than a simple workshop. It was now an empire in the making. But the world around him was changing rapidly, and Louis knew he had to stay ahead. Luxury was no longer reserved for kings and queens alone. It was sought by the rising elite. While Louis was building his empire in the 1880s, his personal life was also blossoming. He married Clemence Emily Perriot, a strong and devoted woman who shared his vision and believed in his dreams. She wasn't just his wife. She was his true partner in life and ambition, offering him both love and guidance. Together, they had a son, Georges Vuitton, who would later inherit the vision and continue expanding the business. Yet, success came with a price. Obsessed with perfection, Louis spent countless nights in his workshop, often missing birthdays, family gatherings, and quiet evenings at home. From the very beginning, he understood a truth most businessmen ignored. To create a lasting brand, you had to sell to the rich. Why the wealthy? Because they shaped fashion, trends, and the desires of society. If the elite chose Vuitton trunks, everyone else would aspire to own one too. There was another reason. Rich clients did not argue over price. They valued exclusivity above all else. Louis never aimed to sell to the masses. He focused on a select few who would pay top dollar for something handcrafted and unique. His strategy worked like magic. Soon, orders came not just from nobles but bankers, merchants, and international travelers. Owning a Louis Vuitton trunk became a symbol of status, wealth, and taste. By the time Louis passed away in 1892, he had built an empire, leaving Georges to carry on the legacy. Before he died, Louis summoned Georges and shared a final lesson. Never sell cheap. Never sell to the masses. Our name must always represent the very best. If the world changes, we must adapt, but never lose what makes us unique. Georges, young and determined, expanded the brand beyond trunks, introducing handbags, cutlery bags, and luxury minibars that redefined high fashion. As the business flourished, imitators began to appear. Cheap copies flooded the market, and customers were being deceived. In response, Georges created the iconic LV monogram in 1896, a symbol that would protect the brand and keep it exclusive for the elite. Under Georges, Louis Vuitton didn't just survive, it dominated the luxury market. Yet, nothing lasts forever. Georges aged, and the empire grew too vast for one man to manage. The world around him was changing with automobiles, airplanes, and new fashion trends. For decades, he worked tirelessly, expanding internationally, introducing leather handbags and accessories that became symbols of status. He carefully protected the brand's exclusivity, ensuring that Louis Vuitton remained a luxury reserved for the elite. By the 1930s, Georges faced his greatest challenge. His health began to fail. Years of constant innovation, global expansion, and relentless work had taken a toll. By 1936, Georges passed away, leaving the future of the empire in question. Gaston Louis Vuitton, Georges' son, stepped forward to continue the legacy. He had grown up surrounded by luxury, design, and craftsmanship, learning the secrets of the trade firsthand. But the world was a different place. The Great Depression had shaken economies worldwide, and traditional travel trunks were no longer essential. Fashion and travel were evolving rapidly. People wanted more than simple luggage. They wanted style, practicality, and modernity. Gaston knew that to survive, the company had to adapt. He introduced smaller leather goods, purses, and high-end handbags, focusing on fashion-forward designs for everyday use. Innovation became his mantra. However, before he could fully realize his vision, World War II erupted, plunging France and the world into chaos. From 1939 to 1945, France was occupied by Nazi Germany. Businesses closed, luxury brands struggled, and the economy was in ruins. Gaston faced a harsh choice: close the company or find a way to continue operations under occupation. To preserve Louis Vuitton, he cooperated with the German-occupied government, a decision both practical and controversial, ensuring the survival of the family legacy. It was a shadowed chapter in Vuitton history, one that remained largely hidden for decades, only to be revealed years later when historians discovered the brand's ties to the Nazi regime. Yet, despite these challenges, Louis Vuitton endured, proving that even in the darkest times, vision, resilience, and determination could secure a lasting legacy. But despite the chaos, the devastation of war, and the uncertainty that hung over Europe like a heavy shadow, Louis Vuitton endured. The company managed to hold on to its legacy, its craftsmanship, and the trust of its wealthiest clients, even in the darkest of times. When peace finally returned, Gaston Louis devoted himself to rebuilding not only the business, but also the image of a brand that symbolized elegance, prestige, and resilience. But this new beginning was anything but easy. Post-war Europe was a land covered in scars. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, economies were collapsing, and ordinary people were struggling simply to survive. Most had no thoughts of designer handbags or luxury luggage. They were focused on food, shelter, and recovery. Yet Gaston Louis knew a timeless truth. The wealthy, even in moments of crisis, never abandon their taste for refinement. Luxury may bend in difficult times, but it never disappears. This conviction shaped his plan. Louis Vuitton would focus on exclusivity and quality so exceptional that only the most powerful and influential could afford it. By offering products that were rare, finely crafted, and deeply symbolic of prestige, the brand not only survived, but once again began to thrive. By the 1950s, Louis Vuitton had regained its strength and reclaimed its place at the top of the luxury world. It was during this golden recovery that the company introduced some of its most iconic handbags. The Speedy bag, made for stylish women who were constantly on the move, perfectly blended elegance with practicality. The Keep-All bag offered a modern alternative to heavy trunks, designed for travelers who valued freedom and lightness. And the No bag, first imagined as a stylish way to carry champagne bottles, became a playful symbol of luxury. At this point, Louis Vuitton was no longer just a brand for travel, it was a fashion icon. But time was moving forward, and Gaston Louis himself was growing older. The question now loomed: who would guide the empire into its next chapter? By the 1960s, Louis Vuitton had become one of the most respected luxury names in the world, yet the pace of change in fashion and culture was faster than ever. Competition was fierce, wealth was spreading across continents, and new luxury players were appearing everywhere. Gaston understood the brand needed a fresh vision, bold moves, and someone who could think far beyond the traditions of the past. So he turned to his son-in-law, Henri Racquemire, a sharp, forward-thinking businessman who believed that Louis Vuitton could transform from a family-run company into the greatest luxury empire in history. Henri was not a designer, and he wasn't a typical merchant either. He was a visionary who saw the potential for global dominance. At that time, Louis Vuitton was admired across Europe but had not yet fully conquered the international stage. Henri realized that to reach new heights, the brand would need radical changes, wider expansion, higher prices, and a complete reimagination of what luxury meant. He began by entering the richest markets, the United States, Japan, and the Middle East, where demand for high-end fashion was exploding. Next, he boldly raised prices, knowing that exclusivity would only make Louis Vuitton more desirable. A handbag was no longer just an accessory. It became a badge of social standing, a declaration of wealth and influence. But Henri didn't stop there. He transformed the Louis Vuitton shopping experience itself. Stores became majestic temples of luxury, places where customers were treated like royalty. Champagne service, private shopping rooms, and personalized attention turned every visit into an unforgettable event. Louis Vuitton wasn't targeting everyone. It was reserved for the world's top 1%, millionaires, billionaires, celebrities, and royalty. To heighten the brand's aura, Louis Vuitton introduced rare and exotic creations. Some handbags were made from genuine crocodile leather, with prices starting at $50,000 and often exceeding $100,000. Others featured python and ostrich skins, turning them into collectibles. There were even custom minibars and cutlery bags crafted for private jets and luxury yachts, often costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Custom trunks, tailored to individual desires, sometimes reached prices of $500,000, representing the ultimate in artistry and exclusivity. But as Louis Vuitton's fame grew, so did the problem of counterfeits. Fake bags flooded the streets of Paris, New York, and Tokyo, threatening to erode the brand's value and uniqueness. Henri responded with one of the most ambitious anti-counterfeiting campaigns in history. Teams of investigators tracked down counterfeit factories, governments were lobbied to enforce stricter laws, and innovative security features were added to the products themselves. But Henri knew protection wasn't enough. He wanted to elevate Louis Vuitton beyond being a luggage brand. In 1987, he made a bold, game-changing decision. He merged Louis Vuitton with Moët and Chandon, the world-famous champagne house, and Hennessy, a prestigious cognac maker. Together, they formed LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy, a powerhouse unlike anything seen before. This merger transformed Louis Vuitton from a respected luxury label into the cornerstone of the largest luxury group on earth. Under LVMH, dozens of iconic brands were united, and Louis Vuitton secured its position as the beating heart of global luxury, innovation, and timeless style. Under the leadership of LVMH, the brand expanded far beyond luggage into fashion, jewelry, cosmetics, and premium alcohol, growing into the richest and most influential luxury company in the world. Every decision Henri Rackemeyer made strengthened the company's global presence and reputation for excellence. Yet, despite his incredible achievements, he did not live long enough to fully enjoy the immense empire he helped create. Soon, a young and ambitious businessman named Bernard Arnault entered the scene, hungry for influence and determined to take control of LVMH. He recognized the enormous potential of the brand and executed bold, aggressive strategies to seize leadership. In the competitive world of business, leadership changes often involve tough decisions and ambitious strategies. By 1989, Arnault had managed to push Henri Rackemeyer aside, taking complete charge of LVMH and ushering in a new era of unprecedented growth and ambition. Bernard Arnault expanded LVMH into untapped and highly lucrative markets such as China, Russia, and India, attracting the attention of the wealthiest and most influential clientele in the world. He strategically acquired legendary luxury brands, including Dior, Givenchy, and Fendi, making LVMH the most powerful and diversified luxury conglomerate on the planet. Under his leadership, LVMH launched ultra-exclusive, high-priced products, some reaching millions of dollars, specifically designed for the world's elite. Today, LVMH's total value exceeds $500 billion, solidifying its position as the richest and most dominant luxury company globally. Bernard Arnault himself is consistently ranked among the wealthiest people on Earth, with a fortune surpassing $200 billion. Owning a Louis Vuitton product has become a clear symbol of achievement, refinement, and social status. Each item is meticulously handcrafted by the world's finest artisans, representing unmatched quality, elegance, and exclusivity. Even after more than 170 years, Louis Vuitton remains the most powerful and recognizable luxury brand in the world. It all began with a young boy who had nothing but a dream, relentless determination, and the courage to pursue it against all odds. His story demonstrates that vision, innovation, and perseverance can transform even the humblest beginnings into a timeless legacy. From crafting the first handmade travel trunks to designing billion-dollar handbags and luxury goods, every step of Louis Vuitton's journey has been rooted in mastery, creativity, and dedication. Despite wars, economic crises, and fierce battles for control, the brand has endured and thrived, proving that it is far more than a company. It is an enduring symbol of ambition, resilience, and the extraordinary power of dreams realized.